Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Sunandini and I'll be the host for tonight. We have the pleasure of having Shreya Sachdev, Head of Marketing at Puma, as a guest speaker. She's an IIM Lucknow and Lady Shri College alum and an ex-Mckinsey where she worked for 3 consecutive years as a consultant. So today's objective is very simple. We are going to discuss one, Shreya's journey to Puma as Head of Marketing, understanding her career transition from consulting at McKinsey. Second, we are going to discuss about some marketing insights, the truth about these fancy marketing gimmicks, or is there something new technology coming up in marketing? And number three, which I think most of you are interested in, is the career. So we are going to talk about how you can make your marketing career and reach your top potential. So please welcome Shreya Sachdev. Hi, Shreya.
Hi, happy to be here.
Great. So, guys, if you have any question, as I always say, just write it on the chat box and we'll take this up after my questions are over. So, wait for that. And we are going to start this. So, Shreya, are you ready for this?
Absolutely, let's go.
Great. So, Shreya, as many people have asked you, so you have pursued English for your undergrad, and I'm really curious to know how this all shifted towards business. And right now, you are the head of marketing. So, can you just share something about your post 12th grade decisions, aspirations, how English turned into business?
Sure. So I always tell people this about my journey, right? That if you see it on the face of it, it seems like none of the dots line up, right? Because I did science in 11th and 12th, and then I jumped to literature for my undergrad, and then I did an MBA and postgrad. I started with consulting. I moved to consumer. Now I'm doing marketing. So this is like hope for anybody who hasn't figured it out yet and still wants to explore. Exploring doesn't mean wasting your time. I think it's perfectly fair to spend time figuring out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and exploring all avenues before you take a call that this is what you want to do, right? So I think just to give you a sense, I of course did science in 11th and 12th, but this is something that I always tell people. I'm almost 50-50 right and left brain, right? Which not a lot of people are. So my entire journey has been how do I find the right balance of both, right? Something that challenges both sides of me and my interests, right? Science was great, but it felt like my right brain wasn't being challenged enough. Um, Post 12th, I had a couple of options. I think one was actually to go into NIFT, right? So I had a great ranking, and I considered it very seriously. I have always been and continue to be very passionate about fashion, so that seemed like a very viable option. But then LSR happened as well, and I got a great score in the exam, CATE exam there, and I just happened to go to Delhi, and I had to make a choice between LSR and NIFT, and it so happened that the LSR interaction was first, right? And I just went there and I fell in love with the people and the teachers and the atmosphere and the students, and I said, this feels like home, so I'm going to do this, right? So a lot of my decisions in life have similarly been instinct based or gut based, right? I don't regret it at all. I think LSR 3 years really helped me understand who I was as a person. It really helped me identify what I wanted out of life. That was also the time where I did a bunch of design internships, right, with fashion designers. And that's when I realized while I don't exactly love the uber creative parts of the business like cut, color, fabric design. I love the idea of managing a creative business, right? So the decisions that go into how you deal with your customers, where do you stock your products, what is your go-to-market strategy, how do you solve for your accounting, how do you deal with the media. I did all of that. I attended fashion shows. I helped the designer that I was interning with there. And all of that sort of helped me realize that maybe doing an MBA makes sense because I like the non-core design parts much more than I like the design parts, right? So in hindsight, I think it was a good decision not to go to NIFT because maybe my core skills don't lie there. And it was a great decision to go to LSR because I met some of the most impressive people I have ever seen in life, and their zest for life, their zest to create change, really stuck with me, right? So um, I think that's when I started preparing for the CAT in my second year, and gave it and got into IIM Lucknow. So, of course, no break at all. Literally, the day my final exams at LSR ended is the day I landed up at IIM Lucknow for my next chapter. I think IIM Lucknow again. I went a lot with my gut, right? When I joined, I was one of those starry-eyed kids that didn't even know what consulting was. When people said, "Oh my God, McKinsey's coming to campus," I said, "McKinsey? What's McKinsey? What's that?" Right. So there was no plan. But again, I interacted with a bunch of alums. At that point, I was part of a fest committee, and a lot of the fest committee's alums were working in McKinsey. So I spent a lot of time talking to them. And again, the vibe just felt right. It felt like this is a great place where I learn a lot. The people look fun, and luckily I got a shortlist. So I said, let's give this a shot, right? Um, and again, because like I said, I was quite starry-eyed in a lot of ways. While people were extremely nervous and they felt the stakes were very high, I just breezed through my interviews because I said, okay, this looks fun. Like it's no big deal. Let's do this, right? And I think honestly, sometimes that helps, right? Because when you don't overthink things is when you can give it your best. So landed up in McKinsey, did about 3.5 years there. I think the first 1 year was 1.5 years was just being open to doing everything, right? So whatever came my way, whether it was like real estate or pharma or metals and mining, like I didn't hold back from whatever it is that I could do to understand this space and what my interests were a bit more. Um, but towards, I think, the end of my second year is when I started doing a bit more consumer work, right? I started working with brands in the consumer space, thinking about their go-to-market strategy, doing consumer research. And that's when the consumer bug really hit me. I said, you know what, this is way more exciting for me than any of the other B2B studies that I've done, right? And maybe this is where my future lies. And which is why once I sort of realized that, and I spent about a year dabbling in that space, I said, if I'm sure that I want to do consumer, and I'm excited by the potential impact that that creates, let's go out there and look for a place that lets me do that, right? So that's how Puma, of course, came into the space. Um, at that point, I think I was, of course, looking for something that would be of interest to me, because I think the one thing that consulting offers you is constant change, so you never get bored. And so if you're moving to a role full time and it's not short projects, you have to be sure that it's something that you're excited about doing every day, right? In my case, it was selling clothes and shoes, right? So I said, of course, I have to do that. Only then will I be excited to get up and go to work every morning. Um, and when I saw Puma's journey in India, right? I mean, Puma entered the market 10 years later. Within 7 years, we were market leader. We have been increasing the gap with competition every year. In fact, last year, Puma was equal to the revenues of Adidas plus Nike plus Asics plus Reebok in India, right? So for me, this was a very, I think, fascinating facet to see, because globally we are number three, yet clearly this team has done something right to change the game in India, right? And I felt I could learn a lot from these people, and this was a space that would challenge me to bring out my best, right? Because these are go-getters who don't accept the status quo, who fight for what they deserve. This seemed like a great place to get exponential learning, right? And as someone who has spent 3 years in consulting, you of course know and accept that you get the opportunities to gain skills that probably you don't in a lot of other roles, right? Because at a young age, you are presenting to CEOs of other companies, you are being pushed into extreme situations and learning how to adapt and cope. Extremely important skills are being drilled into you day in and day out, right? So I didn't want to lose that exponential learning wherever I went next. And while, of course, a lot of my peers went into the startup world, I think for me, I wanted a space where I didn't face a glass ceiling after 2 years. That what do I do next, right? Because this is such a flat, small organization that I don't know where to grow after this. So I thought, in that sense, Puma sort of presented the best of both worlds, where there's enough scope to grow both horizontally, vertically, laterally. There are enough opportunities globally as well. A lot of people from my team have moved to global roles in the past couple of years, but at the same time, it's so fast paced, simply because of what they have achieved in India, that the learning and the agility would remain that of a startup, right? So for me, that seemed like a perfect fit. So of course, when I joined, I was leading the strategy team, and at that point, a lot of people warned me. They said, you're going into a role like strategy, that can often be a double-edged sword, right? And how it turns out is completely dependent on the organization. So if the organization sees strategy as a valuable role and sees you as a valuable asset, you will have an amazing journey where you get to work with stakeholders across the board, senior leaders across the board, deliver extreme impact, right? But if you are in an organization that doesn't value strategy as a function and doesn't see your role as critical, it's a no direct impact role in that sense, right? Because you're not owning a P&L, you're not directly interacting with the end consumer. And so in that sense, there is a risk that you may end up in a pen pusher role without any tangible impact that you are able to create, right? So while leaving, everyone told me, give it about 3 to 6 months, right? See how it pans out. And if you feel this is an organization where you're not going to be able to grow well in this role, just leave, find something else, right? Um, as luck would have it, I think I entered a great organization that was extremely supportive of the role that I was doing. Literally from the second day that I joined, I got into big projects, right? With, like, again, no time to, like, adapt or catch my breath, which was absolutely amazing. It kept things exciting, and it continues to keep things exciting. And then a year and a half in, after doing varied strategy projects across different domains, including a couple of consumer facing ones, the marketing opportunity came up, right? And it was very interesting how that conversation went, because my manager, who's the MD of India and Southeast Asia, called me and said, hey, there is this role and we think you'd be perfect for it. By the way, we're in the middle of the pandemic, so you're obviously not going to get access to your team. And oh, budgets are on lockdown, obviously, go have fun, right? So it was really trial by fire, if you can say that, in the first year and a half, almost 2 years, right? Because I think the entire world was learning to adapt in a situation that they had not anticipated before. But I think it was superb for me, because again, the learning curve was very steep, right? You are plunged into a situation where you are told you have to make the most, and speaking at this point to your consumers is most critical because sentiment is most down. But by the way, you don't have the resources and the budget that you did in a pre-pandemic world, right? That really teaches you how to do enough with what you have, whatever little you have, and find innovative ways to adapt and survive and still thrive, right? So now I feel like whatever comes our way, we are, like, as a team, ready for, because if we can deal with that, right? And the joke is always, in the industry, that marketing doesn't understand the concept of a budget, right? They just go and spend. But if you can do marketing with a zero budget mandate, then you can do marketing anyway, right? So you are ready for anything. Um, so I think it's been a really crazy journey. And I think in this role, to a large extent, that journey that started post 12th, I said I have to find something that satisfies both sides of me, right and left brain. I find that here, right? Because when you are leading marketing for a brand like Puma that is working hard to continue to cement its number one status in India, what you're chasing becomes really important. The strategy and the thought and the planning behind it becomes really important. But also, unless you have really distinctive, disruptive, creative ideas, you can't make that happen, right? So it's the perfect challenge for somebody who wants to be challenged on both fronts. And yeah, like I tell people, there's a question I get asked all the time, right? What's a typical day in Puma? I say there are no typical days. Every day is crazy, every day is unexpected. That's what keeps it exciting. But yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey. And in hindsight, it all makes sense. But of course, when you see my trajectory, you wonder, what's she up to? Like, what's happening? Why did it take this path that it did?
And so you said that you did some campaigns with zero budget. So can you just like, give us an example that what all you did,
So,
maybe one or two
so I
examples?
think one of the first things that I did probably in the first or second month that I took over was this was the phase when Instagram Live had just launched, right? And people were just sort of dabbling with it and trying to figure out what can we do. I think for us as a sports brand, the most important message at that point was obviously morale is down, sentiment is down, people are you need to encourage people to be resilient and to fight the battle that is coming up. And as a sports brand, we've always felt like sports teaches you those lessons, right? Like it teaches you resilience, it teaches you how to crawl back from an impossible situation, it teaches you how to fight, it teaches you how to not give up. And we said, how can we use this platform of sport to actually help people realize some of these lessons, right? So we organized this IG Live, which Virat Kohli actually hosted, and kudos to him. I think he did about 2 hours non-stop. And he interviewed greats in the sporting world, right? So we had Pep Guardiola, who logged in, who's the coach of Manchester City. We had Sunil Chhetri, who's the captain of the football team. We had KL Rahul, we had Mary Kom. We had all of these folks sort of log in one after the other. So Virat went live from his handle, and each of these folks logged in from the Puma India handle. And they had these really interesting conversations, on what sport means to them. Some very interesting gems that came out that continue to circulate, like does Pep think about skill set or mindset while hiring the next athlete for his team? What does Sunil Chhetri think about leadership and what it takes to lead a team, right? So a lot of parallels between real life and how to solve for what we're going through now, but also for a sports fan, just increasingly amazing, sparkling conversation between legends in the sporting space, right? And of course, that went completely viral, and we spent literally zero money on it. So I think for us, that was a great, I think, initial high and lesson that you don't necessarily need to spend a bunch of money to create impact. It's about figuring out what your consumers want in that moment, right? And finding a way to give it to them. So I think for us, that was the starting point of we can do things with no budget and we can still create impact, right? And yeah.
So I think the last 15 minutes we had a full monologue about your journey completely from 12 till now. But I am very curious about this thing. So, if you see your own journey, the way you narrated, it seems like a easy breezy stuff. You're just flowing. Yeah, you got in McKinsey. Yeah, you crossed this. Yes, you went into strategy. You became the head of marketing. What? Like it seems like it's so easy, but I'm pretty sure there were hardships behind all those things. So, what I want to know is, and people are asking this as well. Many people start at the same level, but some go and reach the top, because top there are like it's like a pyramid, right? As you go higher and higher, the number of people going up is less. So what is it that you did, or that attitude, your gut feeling, your intuitiveness, that is something or some skill that you have which made you reach there?
Um, it's very interesting. I tell people this constantly, that a lot of what we give ourselves credit for, very honestly, is sometimes just luck or serendipity, right? I think in a lot of ways, the way my life panned out is a testament to how like you should keep an eye out for the signals that you're given and make the most of them. Because, for example, if I had not gone to LSR first before I went for my NIFT interview, I would have probably gone with NIFT and my life would have ended up a completely different way. Similarly, had I not continued to pursue the design internships, instead of saying, hey, if I've completely given up on the NIFT path, I'm not going to explore this space further, I said, let's test it out. I lose nothing by doing a couple of design internships. I would have not realized that I want to do an MBA, right? Similarly, when I joined B School, I think a lot of credit to my seniors, right? Because I applied for the FES committee again, thinking B School might be too much left brain. I need a little bit of right brain activity. I was doing media and communications there, interestingly. So literally like Photoshop posters, dealing with the media, writing press releases, things like that, right? Very right brain stuff. And that's how I sort of said, I want to do this because I want to explore the space. And those were the seniors that actually pushed me, helped me with my resume. There were times when I would get so frustrated. I'd be like, what is this resume process? And they would stay up till 4 a.m. to submit my resume so that it could go to the right companies. The hours that they spent training me on this is how you solve a case, right? A consulting case. The peers and the alums that I got a chance to talk to who were in McKinsey, which maybe I would have not gotten access to if I were not in the FEST committee, right? So similarly with Puma, I think a lot of people, like I said, from consulting would have looked at maybe a startup role, right? Or something with like a manga type company. In my case, I said again, I just want to go with my passion, right? And then when the opportunity came, I didn't hold back and say, okay, I'm not sure, or this is not what my peers were doing. I think I was the first McKinsey consultant ever who joined Puma in India, right? I think it's just about, some part is serendipity, you go with your gut. The other part is when opportunities present yourself, you don't sit on them, right? You make the most of them. You're not complacent about anything that falls on your lap. You ensure that you do a good job with it, right? So I think it's a combination of keeping your eyes open for what comes your way, and then giving it your 100%, right? I am sure that while I may have gotten the strategy role without, of course, any experience in consumer space per se, or anything on my resume to really say maybe I can do a great job leading this function, I am 100% sure also I would have not gotten the head of marketing role had I not proven impact and strategy, right? Had I just sat with the role and done nothing with it. So I think one is, of course, you can't compare everybody's journey is the same, because luck and chance and serendipity has a very big role to play. But for those who get ample opportunities, it's always important to make the most of them and not let go of them.
Sounds like a very positive and so now next, let's get into more about marketing. So we have spoken a lot about, luck and positive things and everything is good. But let's understand one thing is very clear. So marketing is a thing where you face the consumer directly. And if you are in India, public has a say for everything. And you're in a brand like Puma, where public knows this brand very well. So what I want to understand is there have been cases or like past campaigns which went wrong. Like if I say, for example, there was a Puma campaign where employees or the models were thin, and people had an issue that is this, body shaming. But obviously, that's not the intention. No company would come, yeah, we'll body shame today. They won't do this. That's not their intention. But there are backlashes anyhow when these things happen. So how does a company, or as the head of marketing, you deal with those clashes?
Sure. So I think one thing, when you always think about a marketing role, right, and what you want to say to the consumer, this is something that we constantly keep pushing each other in the team to solve for, is put yourself in the consumer's shoe, right? If there's an idea or there's a thought, don't think about it and get excited by what you would want, right? Who is your consumer? What is it that they would see, and what is it that adds value for them, right? Not necessarily what excites you. And this is something that I feel a lot of marketers maybe don't spend enough time thinking about, is that just because an idea is exciting to you, right? You are part of the brand. Of course, anything the brand does will be exciting to you. You need to ask a question: what is exciting or interesting or value adding for your consumer? Somebody who is not in the brand, who has thousand other interests, and this is just something that comes along in their day, right? What would get them to sit up and care and take notice and engage, right? So that's something that we ask very regularly. And unless you are able to put yourself in the consumer's shoe, not only will you, of course, not be able to create distinctive campaigns that cut through the clutter, but there are possibilities that you will go wrong as well, because you're not thinking from the consumer lens, right? So that's the first part. But I think the second part, and this is something anybody in marketing will tell you, right? Of course, a large part of your job is consumer listening. Of course, a large part of your job is sentiment analysis. You need to know at any point of time, what are your consumers saying about you, and are they positive things or negative things? That being said, um, it's very important as a marketer to take people's opinions. It's even more important as a marketer to know whose opinions matter and whose don't, right? Because like you said, in a country like India, people have a lot of things to say, and a brand like Puma that is constantly visible, people will have 1,000 things to say. Not all of them will be positive. In fact, the more interesting the activation or the campaign you do, the more likely it is that it will be polarizing, and there will be quite a few people who will not agree with what you do, right? I think in such a situation, very important to hear what your audiences are saying. Don't shy away from them and hide under a rock and not hear the criticism. But equally important to know, this criticism is valid. I want to make sure that I'm solving for it. This criticism is not valid, right? And if I look at the stats or the data of how my campaign has done, the data clearly tells me that this criticism is something that I don't need to listen to, right? These people are somebody that will have negative opinions, will continue to have negative opinions about everything, but it doesn't materially impact what I am doing, right? So I think you develop a bit of a thick skull as well in marketing, but of course it would be foolish to completely blind yourself and shut your eyes and not hear what people are saying about what you do, right? That would be the dumbest thing to do as a marketer. So very, very important to hear the entire spectrum of what people are saying. Equally important to have the skill to filter out what's critical and what's not.
Got it. So, just wanted to understand from a person who is just looking into marketing as an option for the career. So, if we had to explain your role from the junior most, like maybe in your team, the junior most person, till the senior most, that is you. So, the difference in these roles, that can you just explain in brief what happens in this?
Sure. So look, the one thing that I always tell people, at least about Puma, is that there is no difference in the ability for you to create impact. Some of our most interesting ideas and differentiated campaigns have come from people with 2 years of experience or 3 years of experience, right? So as a team, everybody can and is expected to create impact, and this is something that goes back to consulting as well, and this is something that we practice here at Puma as well, is this concept that if you are a part of the team, you are expected to contribute, right? Nobody is a sitting duck. Everybody needs to earn their place, right? So one, it's very important for anybody who's just entering marketing also to not downplay or underestimate what value they can add, right? Because I think and I know a lot of people would relate to this. Till date, I see a lot of marketing centric firms coming to B schools and hiring freshers, right? And the reason they do that is because sometimes the fresher the thought process, the more differentiated and innovative and unique your communication is, right? Because you always need to think differently to break through the clutter. Today, every second brand is spending a huge amount of marketing money to acquire and engage consumers, right? So one, I would say, don't ever underestimate, as a young person getting into marketing, the value of your opinion, your idea, your thoughts. Even if, like I tell my team as well during creative brainstorming sessions, it doesn't matter if to you it seems like a brain fart. Maybe somebody else can pick up something from it and build further and get it to a stage where it's a great idea that you go ahead and implement, right? So I think one is in terms of ability to contribute and ability to create impact, there aren't and should not be any differences in how people across various roles or designations operate. That being said, I think any individual in a company plays two roles, right? One is the individual contributor role, that you as an individual add certain value, and then is your management or your teamwork role, right, where you guide other people in your team to deliver. As you go up the ladder and the more time you spend and you continue to get to higher positions of seniority, the individual contributor time that you get becomes lower, and the time and effort that you invest in guiding your team and ensuring they are doing their best and they can be successful, right? An enabler per se, that am I bringing out the best in my team? Am I guiding them in the right way? Am I ensuring that I'm setting them up for success? That tends to take precedence, right? And which is why I often tell people who are just starting out their careers that initially skill sets are super critical, right? Build the right kind of skills that ensure that you are a valuable asset to any team that you join. But the higher you get, spend more and more time thinking about mindset, right? Because that is way more critical in a senior level, right? And by mindset, I mean how do you deal in a stress situation, right? How do you do crisis management? Are you somebody who others can come to for help or support? Is your natural state to be a problem solver, or are you someone who just finds and highlights problems without solving them, right? Mindset becomes way more critical in senior levels, and this is agnostic of role, right? Irrespective of what role you're doing, these are some of the mindsets that cut across. But to get to that level, building expertise becomes super critical as well, right? So whatever you're doing well, work really hard to ensure that you become an expert at that. Whatever you're not doing well, and each of us have these, right? Each of us have certain spikes where we do really, really well, and certain things that maybe we're not the best at. Ensure the things that you're best at don't become so bad that they hold you back. But what will really take you far are the things that you do well, right? So make sure that you spend enough time building that into a talent, that you can do better than 90% of the people out there, right? And so marketing is the same, right? Each person in the team has a certain core skill set which they may bring. So in my team, for example, there are some people who are leading content, right? There are some people who are graphic designers, there are some people who are copywriters, there are some people who are photographers, some people do very strong program management, for example, right? They will hold a campaign together and activate all legs at the same time. Some people manage influencers and ambassadors. That's a different skill set altogether, right? Some people handle social media handles. That's a different skill set. Some people do sports marketing, and what they understand about that sport and how they can help bring it closer to fans is a different skill set, right? So there are core skill sets that each person in the team has, which are distinctive, which they do well at. And then there is the piece on mindset, right? How do we band together to bring the best out of each other? How do you go beyond just the mandate of your role to show that no matter what the situation is, you can step up and perform, right? All of these fall in the mindset space. And like I said, these are like across, these are not specific to marketing itself. And yeah, the earlier you are in your career, the more you need to focus on your individual contributor role. The higher you get in your career, the more time and focus goes on an enabler role rather than an individual contributor role.
And how does Puma take in technology and use technology to their benefit in the marketing team? As in, like, if I suppose the AI, new AI, Chat GPT, so it came new, and are you guys using it? Are you using it in any way? So, what is happening in that way?
So we've had many sessions experimenting with it, and having good laughs in the team. But no, see, I think the one thing that is super critical for anybody who um, wants to integrate technology into the way they work is to first understand what value it's adding you, right? A lot of times people go out after these shiny objects like NFT or metaverse without really understanding how it works for them, right? Technology should always be an enabler, something where you're plugging it in a way that it adds value. Either it improves efficiency, or it elevates the output, right? Some part of the journey, or it's helping you be more insightful in terms of how you target your consumers, what you say to them, what you learn about them, right? But again, technology is a tool, right? At the end of the day, how you wield that tool determines what you get out of it as an outcome, right? So, for example, we didn't have the kind of access to consumer data that we do today, maybe 10 years ago, right? Does that mean that the guy who was creating amazing creative campaigns is redundant today? No. But what it does mean is that if he has to create a stellar campaign, he or she needs to know what is the data telling him about who his consumer, his or her consumer is, what is it that they want to hear, what is it that they care about, and then adding on that layer of creativity to stitch together a beautiful campaign that speaks to people and really resonates with them, right? So I would say that any distinctive marketing team today should and does view technology as a tool, right, to help them perform better. But unless you have great people wielding that tool, it's not going to fundamentally change your outcomes in terms of how you perform.
And since the last decade, has there been any role which has been completely automated by a machine, AI, or any tool?
So I think maybe not so much from the creative side. But of course, there have been many labor and manual intensive processes which are just time consuming, that don't really require human intervention, right? They're time consuming simply because there was no better way to do them, not because you needed a human being's discretion to understand how to do it, right? So a lot of those processes I see have increasingly become automated, right? And everything from like warehouse automation to something as simple as having a team book your flights and stay when you travel, right? A lot of these have gone through a sea change and have been replaced for the better. Doesn't mean people are losing their jobs. It just means they get to focus on more value adding things where human discretion is really a factor, not just manually inputting data and churning out whatever is the outcome, right? So I think these are the sort of roles that, of course, have seen a sea change. That does not mean that there are certain teams or roles that are zero impacted by technology. Even the creative space, right? Today, you have people who are using AI to generate entire 3D models of cataloging for you on your site, so you don't literally need to sit and shoot, right? So every industry has adopted technology to make them more efficient, to make them more productive. But like I said, I think it's a matter of how you wield that technology that really makes a difference.
So I think I have last two questions for you now. So the number one, just all the 20-year-olds here, whoever is watching and just thinking, is marketing the right fit for them? So what are the skills, or how do you, what are the things that will make sure that, yeah, they are a marketing kind of a person? Like if they had to sit and think, okay, these are the skills I need, or this is the attitude, mindset that I need to stay in this career.
Sure. See, the one thing that I always tell people is that doesn't matter what your resume says, doesn't matter what your background says, and it doesn't matter what your experience has been. Today, I think a lot of people in my team have come after doing 3 years or 4 years of a completely irrelevant course, right? Some of my greatest ideators have come straight from a 4-year engineering course. Somebody who's, one of my best performers has spent 10 years in sales doing absolutely nothing related to marketing and now absolutely killing it in the marketing team, right? So first and most important thing is people should not underestimate themselves by saying, if I have not done anything marketing related so far, that means I don't have the skill set, right? But if you feel that marketing is something, and this is a very easy test to see, the fact that marketing is a landscape that's changing very fast, right? And you constantly need to change the game. If that exhausts you, if you feel like keeping up with that constant change is exhausting, probably marketing is not for you. But if it's exciting, it feels like it opens up a myriad of possibilities for you to experiment, do things differently, then it's definitely something that could be up your alley, right? And I know a lot of people get frustrated because they feel, since I don't have marketing on my CV, no one's going to give me a job, right? Everybody wants people with relevant experience. And my push to them is always the following. There are two ways to break into this space if you feel it's important for you. One is start right at the bottom, right? So it doesn't matter if you have 3 years experience or 4 years experience. You start at an intern level, prove your worth, and then climb up the ladder. You will still save many, many years rather than continuing in a role or a path that you don't see as value adding to you, right? So that's the first advice. The second advice is, and again, this is something that I see a lot of people practice very well in Puma as well as other organizations, is if you're in a particular organization that you enjoy working with, but you want to make a shift in terms of the specific department or function that you are doing, right? There is enough scope for you to go above and beyond what you're delivering now to show potential in a department that you don't exist in, right? And like I said, my own career journey is a testament to that, right? I was doing strategy. It's just that I did a bunch of consumer facing projects as part of that happened to have a lens of marketing, and I did them well. And so the opportunity opened up, right? Showing potential and showing skill sets in a role that you are not necessarily given at the moment, but that again requires you to push yourselves, right? You can't be complacent and say, Arey, but I'm working so many hours on this role. How can I possibly make time? If you want something, you have to fight for it, right? So you within the same organization, you spend enough time getting to know how the function that you want to get into works, demonstrating that you have the requisite skill sets. And I'm sure, I mean, this is something that I know across people want, right? We all want great people for our teams because it's the people that make a difference to your outcome. So if somebody is great at something, people would be a fool not to consider them for their team, right? So I think these are the two ways people can break into marketing. And a very simple test is, does this constant change, does this constant innovation, constantly thinking what's next, what's next, what next, we can't do the same thing we just did. If that exhausts you, probably not the right role for you. If that really excites you, maybe marketing is something you can try out.
So you given great advice, and this is from the perspective of people who want to career in this. So now I want to ask the last question is, imagining you are the interviewer, which you might have been many in many cases. So how do you judge these people that okay, this is the right fit for you?
See, I think one thing that you realize with a subjective role in marketing, right? One, you can never 100% tell till the person joins, right? So at some point, again, you have to trust your gut and say, maybe this person will do a great job and onboard them. A good sense check is typically to ask them to do a project, right? You will give a project, and sometimes I will even ask ad hoc in the middle of the meeting to just see how their on the spot thinking is, right? And if they struggle, if this is not something, if it starts to stress them out, I know maybe this is not the right fit for them, because right, a lot of times marketing is also about picking a moment where you can say something that makes a difference and running with it rather than spending 2 months to plan something out in detail, right? And if that's something that they are not able to do, then maybe this is not the right fit for them. But that being said, I think largely when I interview people for marketing roles, the face-to-face interview is very much just culture fit, mindset, things like that, right? Will this person get along well with the team? Do they have the right approach to work and growth? Are they flexible? Because I know we are an organization where we go above and beyond a 9 to 5, and we are not a 9 to 5, right? So anybody who wants that structure of come in at 10, leave at 6, I will only sit at my desk, I will do exactly what I'm told, probably not the right place for them here, right? So I largely test for mindsets. We give an interview to test creativity, and invariably resume plays very honestly a not so important role, because the fact is that sometimes creative ideas and creative people come from very unexpected places. So you are way more likely to make your type 1 and type 2 errors if you filter just on the basis of resume. um, I have also in the past been very, very impressed by people who have shown initiative, right? So some of the people that we've hired full time in the team, we didn't reach out to them. They reached out to us, sent an email, sent a dossier of all the crazy creative thinking they could have done for the brand. And we got so impressed by the initiative and the ideation that we said, we'd love to have you on board, right? Um, so I think all of these put together help you identify the right kind of people. But with a creative role, there's no exact science, right? It's always a, you take a risk on a person, right? You trust your gut, and you say, I'll go with my instinct, and I'm taking a punt on this person, and let's hope this person proves my gut instinct right.
Great. So I'm done with my questions, and we'll carry forward the Q&A. So people who all have questions, just type it on the live chat and we'll take this up right away. So are you ready, Shreya?
Yes, I'm ready.
Great. So Mile is asking, do you need to have a creative mindset while working in marketing?
Good question. See, again, creative is a very broad space, right? Creative just doesn't mean idea. Creative can also mean you're finding differentiated solutions to do the same thing while others are failing, right? Creative can also be how you approach a problem and solve it. So creative is a very broad space. Um, you do need to be creative in the sense that you need to force yourself to not get into the mindset of ऐसे ही होता है तो नहीं कर सकते, any other way. To me, that is creative. Then ideation, some roles require ideation. I know there are a lot of organizations today that will outsource the creative ideas to an agency. but hire people who have the ability to bring the best out of the agency, the ability to identify what is a good idea and what's necessarily not a good idea. That is also creative mindset, right? So creativity just doesn't mean idea crack kiya, copy likha, shoot kiya, right? Creativity is also in the way you approach a particular problem statement, and that is a must.
Great. So we have Shubhayan who is saying, I'm on the same boat. Congratulations. He is also interested in MBA. So yeah, just wanted to state that you have another person like you. So next we have Akash. He's asking how some people get top job among the people who joined a company together. I think we answered this question beforehand, so I'm going to skip this one. Shubhayan is asking, were you in charge of Suet Gully campaign? If so, how did your team derive the insight behind the campaign?
Sweet Gully is way, way back. That's before I even joined Puma, so that was in 2017. But to give you guys an insight of Sweet Gully, right? The concept of Sweet Gully was essentially based on a shoe that we have called the Suede. Right now, this is a global product that we've had. We were celebrating 50 years of the Suede in existence, right? And the Suede has its own concept of culture, which of course started on the streets of America. It was part of a lot of black movement resistance as well. And so there is a lot of street and culture connotation to the shoe suede, right? So the entire idea was, if we have to showcase the street culture, but we have to Indianize it, because at the end of the day, we're talking to Indian audiences. What does street culture mean in India, right? And that's how the thought process started and the campaign was derived. We said India is a super multifaceted country, so different singers and different rappers and different dancers from different parts of the country were all pulled together, and that's how the campaign came about. But again, I cannot take credit for that because I was not even in Puma then.
Understood. So Mihir is asking, how do you direct your career trajectory towards consulting after specializing in marketing and working for around 3 years? Okay.
Okay, good question. Now, see, I think today consulting is not what it was maybe 5, 7 years ago. Consulting has branched out in a lot of different, avenues and roles. So, you will have people who are the generalists who existed in terms of a role many years ago as well, where they would typically hire people from a B school pedigree, certain logical thinking ability, comfort with numbers, all of that, right? But then you have a bunch of different roles as well. So then you have, say, an MI, which is an implementation team, right? So once the a team has come in, identified the problem and given the solution to the client, you also need somebody to help the client implement the solution well, right? And those are typically longer projects of 6 to 8 to 10 months, right? That is where an implementation team comes in handy, right? And people skills, perseverance, continuing to work with your client well to deliver impact, all of that sits here. Then you have an entire thread of experts that now exist in any consulting company, right? Where you build an expertise of anywhere from 7 to 15 years in a particular domain. You know it really well. You can always come and join and be an expert there and help the partners and the clients to do better in that particular domain, right? So you can be an auto expert, you can be a consumer expert, you can be a pharma expert, whatever that is, right? I think when it comes to pivoting, I don't know what is the background, but typically consulting looks at first principle thinking, right? Which means even if you have zero context of a problem, how can you logically break that problem down into easily manageable and solvable parts and put all of that together to arrive at a solution that makes sense, right? That needs no experience, that needs no background, that simply is a way that you think, right? So I know that when anybody in campus would work towards a consulting interview, they would spend hours and hours and hours practicing this first principle thinking, right? So you have enough case books, you have enough of this where you basically can spend enough time honing this skill set, right? Because that's essentially what a consultant does. You go into a particular industry or a space where you probably don't have enough expertise or experience as the client does, because they do that day in and day out. Where your value add comes is this first principle thought process. You're able to step back and break down a problem that maybe somebody is too close to and be able to provide a solution, right? So I think on a general approach, just first principle solving for that always helps increase your chances. Other than that, at many times it's a question of are they looking to expand their roster or not? Are they looking to hire more people or not? If they are, please send your resume. Don't get discouraged if it doesn't go through the first time. Keep trying, you'll get through.
Great insights. Mihir, I hope you got your answer. Next, we have Shubhayan asking, what I have learned so far is that deriving insights requires lateral thinking. What tips would you give to the future marketers to derive market insights, which lets a brand tap into the spirit of a campaign?
Okay, very complex,
Yeah.
multifaceted question. But let me see if I understand this. Essentially, what you're saying is there a certain thought process or approach that can be built to help people develop the best brand campaigns, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
I guess. Just type it if this is the thing that you're asking. Just go ahead. We'll answer this.
Okay, cool. So I think essentially there are a few things that are super critical for any campaign to be successful, right? I think the first is what is your objective? And this is something that a lot of people sometimes lose sight of as they get into the campaign planning and the execution and further deeper and deeper into the process. But this is something that you need to constantly remind yourself of again and again and again. What is my objective, right? And by objective, there are a couple of things that I mean, right? One is what part of the funnel are you targeting, right? Is it top of the funnel? Is it about awareness, brand consideration, preference for the brand? Or is it bottom of the funnel? Are you purely looking to convert your consumers, right? Drive them down the funnel. Um, that's super important. And the reason why I say that is how you approach your campaign and how you evaluate success of the campaign depends entirely on what your objective is, right? If your objective is top of the funnel, I want lots of people to see this, I want lots of people to engage with this, I want lots of people to talk about this, but I don't necessarily in the short or medium term want this to convert into immediate sales. Your approach will be very different, right? There you will be about selling an idea to somebody, an idea that they feel very passionately or strongly about, right? Versus if it's something that's bottom of the funnel, right, where you are very clear that I'm not selling an idea, I'm selling quite literally a product, right? Then the way you will market to them is very different. You will identify who is your consumer, what is the right product fit for that consumer. In such a scenario, what are the channels that I should reach out to target that consumer? What is it that I should say to them that will get them to be interested in the product that I'm selling? Once I have got them interested, how do I convert them? How do I make that process of conversion super easy and super seamless for them, right? These are the questions that you ask. So it's really important upfront to know what is your objective and then drill down a bit deeper and say, if this is my objective, then here is my KPI, right? And what I mean is, if I, as a sports brand, I'm talking to athletes, for example, right? My KPI or objective or key message that I want to leave them with could be very different than, say, if I'm talking to somebody who's purely interested in just fashion, right? So while in both cases, my top of the funnel awareness objective may be the same, the way I map out those KPIs would be very different depending on what is my key message, right? And then, of course, um, at every stage, right? Whether it's the first objective, then you get into the ideation, then you get into the planning, then the execution, then you roll it out, then you evaluate results. At no point should you lose sight of the objective, right? Because that is something that I see teams do often. They get so wrapped up and involved in the processes that come after that many times they don't question, are we still aligned to the initial objective that we set, or are we losing track of it because we're getting carried away in the process, right? So I think if you keep those core objectives that you have put up front and constantly keep revisiting them, I'm sure that your campaign would be strong and powerful and cut through.
So next, Shubhayan is saying that he has created a deck for the next big campaign for Puma. Can I share it with you?
Tell him to email it to me. You can share my email ID with him and I'll be happy to go through it.
Great. So yeah, please do that. Next, we have Divya asking, is IIM tag really important to get into and be good at marketing career?
Okay. I mean, again, I believe this is something that I've answered enough. And I think in my team, if I just think from the 26, 27 people, maybe there are two people from an IIM, right? Everybody else has either doesn't have an MBA or has an MBA from another institute. In either case, it doesn't matter. That being said, look, every team is different, right? And I see this on LinkedIn a lot in terms of ranks where people say, "अरे, इसकी तो degree है, तभी उसको मिला," and it's unfair because people with an IIM have an advantage, right? And to me, that's a bit baffling. One, because yes, you have an advantage, but it's not privilege to be there, right? You worked hard to get there. So the reason why people would typically look at pedigree when hiring people is the following, right? One is for any role, any HR would get anywhere from 40 to 10,000 applicants, right? There has to be some way to filter through and narrow that pool down. You can't possibly interview 300 people or 1,000 people who have applied for the same role, right? Then it would take 6 years to hire for one role. So you always use some filtering mechanism. The reason why typically people fall back on pedigree like an IM tag is because they feel if this guy has worked hard to get into a particular institute of a particular repute, he has then built himself with peers who have worked equally hard to get into that institute. Maybe chance hai isme koi dam hai, right? Now you need to make that punt or assumption basis certain criteria. There are obviously type 1 and type 2 errors. There will continue to be these errors. There are people from IIM who have gotten roles on the basis of the tag and have not deserved it. There are people who have not gotten roles because they are not from an IIM, probably better fitted, right? That will always happen. But the thought process is typically that I have to take a punt on someone, and the probability that a person who has worked very, very hard consistently will probably come into my organization also and work really, really hard, as opposed to somebody who has maybe not had anything in their resume to indicate. It may be chance, it may be privilege, it may be bad luck, it may be a lot of things, right? But think of it from a person who is hiring. How do you otherwise solve for sifting through so many entries and getting to a point that you can interview people reasonably, right? That being said, while an IIM tag or an IIT tag may get you a foot in the door, how fast you grow after that is completely dependent on your capability, right? So I've seen people without those tags grow significantly higher just on the basis of their merit. Than people who have come in with a certain tag and not made the best use of it, right? So this is my push always to people, that it doesn't matter if you don't start off on equal footing, or you feel somebody who has a particular pedigree has a better shot of getting an interview. Eventually it balances out depending on what you bring to the role, right? So this should never upset someone or make them anxious or unhappy, because once you get there, it's all you, right? Nobody has any interest in keeping someone who is not performing well just because they are from an IIM, right? Nobody is a fool. You do well, you get promoted. You don't do well, you don't get promoted, you stagnate, right? It's as simple as that.
Amazing answer. I hope this helps a lot of people. Next, we have Shubhayan asking, is design thinking critical to marketing?
See, design thinking is a way of thinking. It's critical to every role. You can pull concepts of design thinking into marketing as well. And again, I think, concepts like design thinking, again, go back to a bit of first principle, right? It's just helping you structure a process in your mind and get it to a point where you are able to generate output, right? I see design thinking used very, very often in the product space. So you will see people who are manufacturing products use design thinking, because that cycle of how to get to the finished product, how to iterate, come back to the table, of course helps. But it is such a first principle approach that not just marketing, any department can use it and use it well to improve the way they approach a problem, right? At the end of the day, these are all problem approach and solving techniques. How you use it is completely up to you.
Great. So I'm going to take this last question, and whoever I have left, I think those questions can be answered through Google. So just Google it, guys. So the last question I'm going to ask is by Shivang. He's saying, how do you evaluate the change in channels through which marketing is done from a mainstream TV and print media to uptick in social media marketing, and how do you balance both?
Sure. So see, I think of course the media split for any organization has gone through a large change over the past 10 years, right? Um, there was no social media at some point in time. There was no TV before that. So one part is your media mix always changes basis the channels and platforms that are available to you. Now, typically, how a brand would do this is they would work backwards from who their consumer is and where they exist, right? So for example, in the case of Puma, we don't really do TV, right? Because we know most of our audience today exists on social media or they're on an OTT platform. So it's very rare that you will see us do TV or out of home or print or radio or any of those traditional channels, right? That being said, you will see say FMCG companies spending a lot of money on those channels. Why? Because for them, their audience still exists there, right? And so it's not one platform is better than the other. It's very simply where does your audience exist today? That's one, right? Two, I think the reason why the way people look at their media mix has changed is simply because platforms like digital marketing today give you visibility on the entire consumer funnel, right? So if I put my ad in a newspaper or put my ad on TV or put my ad on a billboard, I don't necessarily have visibility to how the consumer is engaging with my ad. Versus if I put this on a digital medium, I can see how many people saw the ad. I can see how many people clicked on the ad. I can see how many people went and bought the product after that. I can see how many times that person shopped even after that ad, right? So I have complete visibility on the funnel, which essentially means I know what I'm doing right and I know what I'm doing wrong. And hence the ROI on every rupee spent for me makes a lot more sense because I know where to put my money in a way that it speaks the best for me, right? That's second. But I think third is, and this is something that I've seen brands do consistently, even if their strategy is a bit more digital and not so traditional, is at the end of the day, if you have a message that you just want to blast everywhere, right? And you don't want anybody to miss it out. And this is like core top of the funnel. You're not worried about whether they are your consumer or not, whether they will buy after this or not. You just want everybody to be talking about this. Then you are channel agnostic, right? You pick the good mix of all channels. You go big on out of home also, you go big on print also, you go big on OTT also, you go big on digital also, and if you have the budgets, then you go big on TV also, right? I think a lot of these decisions are very fundamental to which company's consumer sits where, and how they measure ROI. I know a lot of people who advertise on TV swear by TV because they say while you cannot see the consumer funnel, if you pump in enough money over time in the medium term, you do see an impact, right? So how you view ROI is like what decides how much you spend and where you spend. And finally, when it comes to what your objective is, if your objective is just reach, you just go all out, right?
Great. I hope this, like, I got a lot of insights from you, and I love your gut feeling and the punt word that you use all the time. So that was very fun for me. So thank you so much, Shreya, for joining us for today's webinar. I'm going to end this webinar right now. Guys, if you have any more questions, drop it. I might ask her later, or through LinkedIn, you can contact her directly and pitch in whatever ideas you have. So thanks a lot, Shreya, for giving your time and giving so many advices and insights.
Thank you so much. I had a blast.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.